All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our Amplify Oshkosh Town Hall meeting. My name is Rob Clayman. I am Senior Vice President of Economic Development at the Oshkosh Chamber of Commerce and also serve as staff to Amplify Oshkosh. Before we get started this morning, I just want to note that Amplify Oshkosh it's a program of the Oshkosh Chamber of Commerce, and it was really formed as a grassroots effort back in 2013, 14-ish. And it's really an initiative of business, education, workforce and economic development officials, and really intended to amplify the awareness of opportunities that surround technology in our businesses, our careers, our education, and really in the Oshkosh area. So I want to first take the opportunity to thank our annual sponsors of Amplify Oshkosh before we get started this morning. At platinum level, we have SmartIS, the Oshkosh Area School District, and Oshkosh Corporation. At the gold level, we have Fox Valley Technical College, Bank First, and Stellar Blue Technologies. And at the silver level, Change Management. And we also receive countless support for many of our Ideas Amplified events from businesses and organizations that help sponsor those. We run a big event that we've had for 4 or 5 years now in the fall that's heavily sponsored and supported by businesses and organizations throughout the region. And then sponsorship and support for many other initiatives that Amplify Oshkosh has, such as our Leadership Academy and those sorts of things, which can be, you can take a look at some of those things on our website at amplifyoshkosh.com. But today we're very fortunate this morning to have 7 members from our Amplify Consortium leadership group for this town hall meeting. And they're going to share their experiences and perspectives on how things are going with their organizations as we're navigating through this challenging time, this COVID crisis. So what I'd like to do first is give some quick introductions, and then we'll get right into the program by asking a series of questions of our panelists this morning. And we will be sure to leave enough time at the end for questions from our virtual audience. So feel free to submit your questions via chat or the Q&A, and we'll monitor that and we'll try to get them out there. So I'm going to start by, and take away, folks, as I introduce you. I'm going to first introduce Javad Ahmad, President and COO of SmartIS International. Javad.
Hello, everyone. My name is Javad. Glad to be here and looking forward to a very wonderful discussion within the panel.
Great, thanks, Javad. And next, Dr. David Gunluck. David is the Deputy Superintendent of the Oshkosh Area School District.
Morning, everyone. Glad to be here.
Thanks, David. Don McCartney is VP of Enterprise Architecture and Simplify at Oshkosh Corporation.
Welcome, and we're glad to be here.
Thanks, Don. Michael Patten, he's with the College of Business lecturer and voice of the Titans at UW Oshkosh. Michael.
Thank you, everyone. Nice to be here. Looking forward to a good discussion.
Rise up Titans, right?
Hail Titans.
Hail Titans, hail Titans. Tina Schulke, owner and CEO of Change Management.
Hi, I'm so glad you're all here, and I hope you get a lot of value from our conversation. I know I will.
Thanks, Tina. Doug Waterman, Dean of Information Technology and Learning Innovation at Fox Valley Technical College. Doug?
Morning, everybody. And we do have to take this waving to each other at the beginning and end of meetings, even when we meet in person in the future.
Yeah.
We'll do that. Thanks, Doug. And Matt Wolfgram, Senior Account Manager at Capital Data. Matt?
Morning, everybody. Glad to be here. Look forward to some great discussion.
Great, thanks, Matt. You'll notice most of the panelists have their Amplify shirt this morning. Don McCartney, we've got to get one over to you at Oshkosh Corporation. That'll be taken care of very soon.
Yeah. It's in the mail, right, Rob?
Absolutely. Right. So, well, great. Thanks again, everybody. And we'll get started right now. I think let's start it out, get things rolling. I'm going to ask first question, really just basically, let's talk about what are some of the specific actions that your organization has taken to maintain a productive environment during this time in the COVID crisis. And why don't we start with Tina? Tina, do you want to start with that?
Sure. I have a little bit different perspective than some of our panelists as a small business owner. So, as a small business, the advantage that we had was we were committed to leadership and we have a lot of practice working remotely. So, initially, we knew our team was very capable of working from home, and the safer at home was not going to be a challenge for us, but it was for many of our customers, our clients, and also our community. So we partnered with the chamber immediately to help other business leaders and other people learn the technologies and practice in a very safe, comfortable way. We had some learning sessions on how to use Zoom, Microsoft Teams, things like that, how to connect online and continue with work. The second thing we did is we reached out to our customers and learned where they were and what kinds of decisions they were making about their projects, and how they were making decisions for their clients, for their workforce, and for their own companies. And what we noticed immediately were a lot of them were moving projects out and scaling them back for the immediate future. That created a real cash flow crisis for our own company. So taking the helm as CEO, as leader, as owner, I needed to look for some financing really for the first time ever in our company. So thankfully, I got some funding from Winnebago County Revolving Loan Fund, and that helped us get through and keep all of our employees on the payroll and active, bringing new projects and really reinforcing our value in the community. So those are some initial steps that we took. We're rolling pretty good now. It feels like it's getting back to where it needs to be. Certainly not all the way there. We're at about maybe 65% of capacity compared to January.
Yeah, good job, Tina. Yeah, especially these times of crisis is where, we are afforded the opportunity to lean forward as individuals, as organizations, as communities, and really drive and demonstrate and pull together to show that we can help each other. And we've seen a lot of that around, especially around Oshkosh and around the globe, where we've seen team members pull together, break out their sewing skills, and then really build mass or create mass that we can give to local agencies, and we can really pass around into hospitals so people can use these. We also seen people coming together and really doing fundraisers to help the less fortunate and give money to the less fortunate. And also we've seen team members come forward and do tutoring for our children that are in school to be able to help them through this crisis, and especially with the crisis of not being able to talk to someone closely. So we've really seen that. And really from an Oshkosh standpoint, our leadership team built committees and teams and sub-teams, and we come out with new policies and procedures that we could go after. And we had town meetings, and that leadership team really drove those town meetings so we could educate the team. They educated the team members on what's next in this process. They really focused on the safer at 6, what our procedures were when we did a conference room, as well as making sure we wiped down and make sure so everybody felt safer, and making sure that when we're out in the public areas or high use areas, so how do we keep that 6 foot distance? So just really kudos as part of being part of this, and where we saw, even though we were practicing social distancing, we felt that connection, and team members really connected stronger, and with those relationships actually built as we were going through. And then for those, I just special thanks to those where their identities, they wanted to be faceless, but their actions were truly priceless. And at this time, I really believe that cream comes to the top, and we've seen a lot of that, both with our leadership and with our teams across the organization.
That's great. Okay, very good. Anybody else want to comment on that? Javad?
Yeah, so I was just going to say, this is this particular event, this pandemic, is unique in the sense that we have a couple locations. We are here, Germany, and in Islamabad, Pakistan, for the first time ever, the stories are the same. For the first time ever, the way we are acting and reacting is exactly the same. So it's not that sometimes it's an event in Europe that is not impacting us, so we can't relate to it. It's an event in Pakistan that is not happening here, or something to that effect. So it was a unique experience in that respect, that we really are sharing and experiencing the exact same thing. You extend it to a certain, to another level, is to say it's the exact same thing that our customers are experiencing, right? So it's the same story. So people are much more willing, as Tina and Don expressed, that allowed us to come together very quickly, that allowed us to make the changes that needed to be implemented very efficiently. We, on the working aspect, were already in a manner of work that was kind of virtual, remote, and all of that, except now it is at a different level, because collaboration, motivation, those are the types of things that are still needs to be done. Yes, we have Teams. Yes, we have Zoom and other technologies, but the behavior still needed to be put in place to ensure that people are motivated, people are committed to, kind of get the work done. As a matter of fact, and I think it's not just us. I think everybody. I listened to a few other statistics as well, and a few other webinars, that productivity in many sectors actually have gone up. Because, for example, in my case, I'm more available now because I'm not traveling, or at one time when, we are setting up our week for, with meeting customers and all of that, I have to account for, travel time and, kind of getting in and out of different facilities. So now I can actually do 3 times the more such interactions as opposed to before. So that is good. I'm more available to my team because I'm always in front of my computer now. So those are the positives. The negatives are still there. As I said, the behavior had to be changed to be able to one cannot beat the face-to-face, one-on-one interaction. However, these tools like, Zoom and Teams and all of that do help bridge that gap to a certain degree. So we have, that's been a very, very fortunate aspect for us, that we were already in tune with all these technologies before this even happened.
If I could jump in just from an education side, kind of, piggyback on your availability side of things, I think that's what we're seeing too, is that our students are actually, in some cases, being much better served, because if they have a question about, something in their content, they can essentially just roll right into an MS Teams meeting or something like that with an instructor and get their question answered and start rolling on, instead of having to wait for another week to go by to be in class and actually get it answered. So they're actually progressing at a faster rate. And I actually saw that on a number of the evals from our spring semester. The thing that, we're having to address at Foxdale Technical College is the hands-on portion, because that's really, what the students value, is to get that hands-on as they approach the workforce. So we actually came back June 6th, a week ago Monday, and having folks that needed to complete different hands-on things like welding or machine tool or things like that, coming on campus, small groups, 9 students max with an instructor. The thing that I saw that was probably the best was that our IT instructors were easy to roll right into this new mode of instruction because they've already been teaching online. But what really made me proud is that they were helping other instructors around the college that hadn't been in the online format to share their knowledge, to say, this is the best way of doing it. This is how you can keep reaching your students and doing the job that we need to do. One of the things, even just keeping in contact with new students. Brian Foote is one of our best instructors on the team, and he jumped right online with a Facebook Live through our marketing department to start advertising, here's the IT programs that we have, and we've already got new registrations because of that. So we're going to be spreading things like that through the college. But I think that immediate access, that's the most important thing that we've seen, and just all of us being in and being able to share the technology and how we do things, the best practices.
Great. We could have Brian turn his video on to take a wave.
Yeah.
So from the school district lens, oh, there's Brian. From the school district lens, I would agree with Don that, you know, some of the best of Oshkosh has been on display throughout this entire process. For us, you know, we have 10,000 students, and one of the things that we focused on first was meeting some of their basic needs. And that included feeding students and families. So that was a big portion, because what some people don't really understand is that in some ways we are the main meal provider for many of our kids. So we had to figure out a way to continue that process in a drive-up fashion. So just like many of you did in private sector businesses, is we had to reinvent our business. And the next thing we did right at the same time we were doing that is we doubled down on communications, because we had a lot of questions and we were building the plane while we were flying it. And we were over communicating at the beginning, which is a good thing. That was very helpful. The other thing that was important is that we continued normal employment. Our teachers were still not only employed, but they were in some cases working more than they ever had, reinventing what they were doing, especially because you're dealing with students as young as 5 years old. So that's kind of a unique way to do business. We then pivoted to what we call at-home learning. Now, fortunately, we had just piloted in grades 6 through 12, switching over to Canvas as a learning management system. And our staff are all using Canvas 6 through 12. So that was a more seamless transition. But K-5 was a different matter. We did not send home devices with students in K-5, and we immediately did that. And our teachers were, as they always are, super creative in finding ways to continue to teach in a mode similar to this. The one thing that we were really fortunate was in 2014, we passed our referendum for learning, which allowed us to have enough resources to provide a device for every child. Otherwise, we would quite honestly have to shut down instruction. We wouldn't have been able to continue. So Oshkosh was poised better than most districts in the area. And other districts have been scrambling because, as you guys know, trying to get product in the middle of all of this can be problematic as well. So we were very, very fortunate that the taxpayers in Oshkosh gave us that capability some years ago. And all the work we've been doing from 2014 to 2020, getting ready, it's been paying dividends big time. So it's been going very well for us.
That's great.
We have a similar story at UW Oshkosh, where we sit kind of halfway in between the things that the school district and Doug were talking about, and the international aspect that Javad was talking about, in that while our primary footprint is in Oshkosh, we have students that are literally from all over the world. And so I was teaching a class at the end of the spring semester where I had a student who was from China, but in Oshkosh, a student from the Wisconsin area who had gotten stuck on spring break down in Florida, another one who'd gotten stuck in Georgia, may not have had all the resources that they needed to complete work. And so one of the things the university, I thought, did really well, and we also use Canvas as our learning management system, was really step up the interaction, not only with the instructors, but with the students and different modes of delivery, and really focusing on the mode of delivery that was going to be unique to that class. As Doug pointed out, with their hands-on issues, we have some hands-on things that we do in the College of Business, but it's a whole other level when we're talking about biology or chemistry. And so the unique ways that they were having to tackle those problems, as opposed to technology issues that we might have in IS in the College of Business. So we had, much as David talked about with the school district, we had devices that we lent out to students. We had some that were delivered down to Milwaukee to get to students because they couldn't come up here. As was pointed out by many people, it was really a team effort and a rethinking of how we do business.
Great, thanks, Michael. And I think we have Matt Wolfgram at Capital Data, kind of on the small business side yet, more of a statewide business. So Matt.
Yeah, from our aspect, it's a little different. My role in particular is customer facing. So this change from this COVID pandemic has been very interesting because we're relationship focused. So our opportunity, and if you look at our panel, my job is to literally sit in front of the people that are here and talk about strategies on how they're implementing technology, how they're utilizing it to enhance whether it's students or growing their business or whatnot. Taking that opportunity to sit down and have those strategy sessions and moving them to a virtual environment on the first step was pretty intimidating. You guys have all been on conference calls where you hear a dog barking in the background or somebody forgot to turn off their alarm clock or whatnot. So it creates, instead of that situation where you're focused on that, another, changes that environment just a little bit. So that was the first piece. And I would only call it maybe our obstacle. What we found through making this change is we can increase the speed of the project. So what's really nice is in a situation like this, if we were working, let's say with Tina's company on an IT project, I could have all my resources on this call and have one discussion to get all of the parameters outlined. I could have my architects, my engineers, and everyone available. And that speed through the project is something that we're finding is very, very impacting in a very positive manner. IT is distracted by a number of different things that are going on. They're fighting their way through navigating these changes already, but being able to give that time back has really become something that they've enjoyed. I think another benefit too is through the implementation process, again, using a virtual platform to be able to connect with all the end users that need to be impacted, training, all of those pieces that can be recorded. We talk about knowledge transfer all the time. Well, now that we're doing it in this platform, we can record that information and share it, after the fact so that they can create that resource. So some things that we're not doing, we can't come up, we got an elbow bump or whatever, we're doing those virtually now. Handshakes have probably gone to the wayside. But I think the big piece is still focused on establishing that relationship, building that trust. You can still build rapport through a video conference. It just might take a little bit more patience, but we're excited. I think the biggest thing for me is being able to be way more effective throughout my day. I can cover 4 companies that are in 4 different corners of the state, all from this location in a short amount of time, and be very effective for them. So it is a different shift, but so far we're seeing some real positive results from it.
Yeah, I really like that, Matt. And, I think at the same time, just the exposure that we have to other industries as well, what I'm hearing from this panel is we have a perspective that's maybe on one side of a continuum, right? Like there's a whole continuum of experiences in productivity and work life and who can get what accomplished, and how this pandemic has affected what day-to-day work looks like and is, and the stresses. Some things that we noticed along the way, speaking through and along with manufacturers and construction trades and retail and a whole bunch of other customer, not as sales heavy, but other customer facing experiences, and where physical labor needs to be accomplished in a group setting, the changes and transformations that have occurred and the kind of communication that needs to exist and the kind of leadership that needs to exist in a time of increasing amounts of information, and the truth really changing as you go. So uncertainty and continued, like one thing you can be certain of is continued uncertainty into the future. That's really made leadership a critical requirement at every level. And so there's different stressors, different levels of productivity, different kinds of communication that's being experienced in our community, and we need to serve all of that. So what we're benefiting from sometimes becomes the challenge for others. So what do we see? I've got a question for this panel. What do we see as how we're addressing that in communications, in technology, in supporting our leaders and frontline workers?
Good point. One of the things that we've seen is it's not a one-size-fits-all strategy, right? It's about building those relationships, understanding the team members, and understanding specific needs. Because as we all go through this, we have certain needs and certain things from an individual perspective. And truly understanding that and managing and leading through those times is not black and white. We have not done this before. So we're developing skills as leaders, and like you mentioned, communication. That's communication not only with our team members, but as a leadership team. How do we communicate the best way, and ideas, and getting those ideas out on the table? How do we best kind of go through this and talk through those scenarios?
I think in businesses, we have been talking about agility and agile for the longest time. I think this is the test of time. Businesses who are able to be really agile in the true sense, to be able to rethink their SOPs, to be able to quickly adjust to the changing behaviors, even in many cases, as Michael pointed out, or David pointed out, specifically in the higher education or K-12, how they quickly change the model of how the instructions work, or in many cases, in retail, healthcare, all of those places, even in manufacturing, the way of doing business has very quickly transformed. So all those who have been able to adjust to this in a quicker manner will be the ones who will actually not only just get out of it okay, but actually may even be getting out of it better than before. Because if you look at it in the long run, we already talked about efficiency has gone up, productivity has gone up. So those who have been able to take advantage of that will actually be better. In our case, what we learned is our PMO group was, if I have to pick one team amongst our teams that actually stood out and that actually carried us through and very quickly helped us transition through this, was our PMO group. They really, really worked diligently to ensure that, as I said, behavior are put in place appropriately, because people, if you leave it, kind of as was discussed, communication was a very critical part. Certainly, although we are set up to work virtually and remotely in our Pakistan office, especially, there were still 70 people coming into the office. They still had daily stand-ups. They still had, those collaborative meetings and things like that. Now they are all gone. Now they are certainly virtual. To kind of bring that, collaboration back to the same level very quickly without, letting people left to wonder as to what am I supposed to be doing, what is next. One of the key things that we asked, although you are kind of in a flex time, try to maintain a work schedule as best as you can. So don't think that I have 24 hours to do things. Do it in a manner so you still come to work. As I said, in my case, I started out the first week, I set myself on a dining table, right? Very quickly, my wife and my kids said, this is not it. Because if there's a meeting, I'm telling everybody to quiet down. This doesn't work. And very quick, because we did not know how long it's gonna last, right? So as soon as I realized, we put our office, my office, especially in my study in my basement, and then encouraged everybody to do that. So we are having the similar structure in life to be able to make sure that we feel as part of that, as a regular work routine. But 2-minute commute is the best thing that I've seen. And now we are starting to think of returning to work, and many people are thinking maybe we don't have to. And I think it may actually work for us at least, because it's just opened up a new way of engaging and doing doing regular work. So
As a takeoff from that, can some of the other panelists kind of talk about what your organizations have done with, from an employee perspective, expectations? Have they changed? Are they the same? And that's a good point, Javad. I mean, it's really, you're probably analyzing right now. Maybe we do want some of our employees to kind of work from home on a larger percentage of time. Can some of the other panelists talk about that a little bit?
In K-12 education, we have a series of barriers that have been put in place over time. And some people think that barriers are all negative, and they aren't. Sometimes those barriers were put in place for a good reason. But we've found that in the past 3 months, we've blown over barriers that we thought were going to take us 3 years to get through. So there's been a lot of change going on with that. And the challenge from a leadership perspective is we are living in a gray area time. And our people who are black and white leaders are the ones who are most challenged in leading in this time, because it's just so different to them. We are trying to figure out how are we going to start school in September. So getting at your question, Rob, what is that going to look like for us? And to be honest, we don't know. We know that we have to prepare for 3 different eventualities. Number 1, starting school like we normally do. We're pretty good at that. We're not worried about that one. Number 2 is doing school like we did here at the end. And we realize that we can't do it, as Javad said, when we first started this, we're like, yeah, we can punt for a week and we can figure this out. Well, if we're going to do this for a longer chunk of time, we're changing how we do business to leverage that. The third one is sort of a hybrid mode, in where we may pivot back to at-home learning and then in-person learning and at-home learning, depending upon how the outbreak goes. So we do have a series of situations very similar to Javad talking about working from home, where we may have some instructors who are doing more online instruction all the time. It may be some instructors who cannot necessarily be in front of kids due to whatever conditions they may be going through. So we're sort of doing an all of the above approach, and in an environment that has changed slowly for so long, this rapid pace of change is liberating to some and challenging to others, but it's exciting to watch.
Back on the education comments. Yes, absolutely. We will be changing the way we do business. When we took a look at the reviews that we'd asked our students to take after our various classes, it was amazing how for the first time we were seeing real appreciation of in-person learning by students who'd seemed rather ambivalent about it before, even though that's what they'd chosen. And a whole other group that were saying, wow, I really like this online learning. I want to see more of that, especially in specific areas. So that's at the macro perspective. At the micro perspective, I chose to conduct recorded the lectures, put them out there for students to watch on their own, and then our scheduled in-person time, we worked together on either labs or assignments or had discussions, and that received nearly universal positive feedback, which for those in K-12 education, you've heard about that as flipped learning for years. And we'd started doing some of that, and I think that's going to take off a little bit more. This whole idea of the things that you don't need me as the instructor for, or don't need me live for, let's put that out online and in an asynchronous format. Whereas the things that you do need my expertise, where there's a question you need a clarification on, or a concept you need a clarification on, or a lab that's going to require me to interact and help with you, maybe that's what's going to be the more in-person style.
Yep. I think too, David, you were talking about over communicating at the very beginning, and we did that also. But I think that was a required part of this whole thing, because we were developing how we were going to communicate with each other, with our students, and we were developing the processes on the fly to actually do that, and coming up with everything from what works, what doesn't, how can we adapt right now. And we were meeting as a leadership group across the college every other day and developing completely new processes. But the good part was we had all the players at the table to develop those processes. And like you said, you know, stuff that would take a year or two with different committees and all that, we did it in one meeting, and we adapted, and we're using Agile all over the place because, you know, we implement something, well, this worked, this didn't, we need to modify that. And the next meeting, we take care of it. So, you know, we streamlined that whole process. And bringing students into the equation, you know, the instructors were saying, okay, what works for you? So bringing that back to the table. So when we talk about Agile, I mean, we were set up for this.
I think one big key that we've taken away on my side of things is, again, going back to kind of that speed of being able to get things done. I love the reference to breaking down barriers. I mean, you talk about simple things like, you know, executing a contract. You don't really think about that being a big deal if you had to do it electronically, but there are some things that have to come into play. And to your point, Doug, I think just forcing the ability to make the decision now and going with it. And you know what, it's kind of the old, you know, dad teaching you how to swim method, right? They kind of throw you out into the water and see what happens. As long as you're willing to adapt to that change quickly, we found that that's been very successful. Being able to move whatever that decision is, make that now and find out how that works. And I think customers have responded really well from that perspective too. So.
Mm-hmm. One thing that we're seeing.
Sorry. I was going to say that one of the positive things out of all of this is people are more willing to change, more willing to experiment. I think because it is one of those things that's universally impacting everybody. You know, so yes, there are still some, you know, hard lines, some people that are struggling with some of the things, but overall, my experience has been, no matter who I talk to, employees, customers, peers, all of that, everybody is willing to listen. Everybody is willing to figure out what is the better way. And that's actually a very, very good positive thing out of this. As people are, as I said, all stakeholders are literally now, as Doug pointed out, are invited to the table and everybody's working collaboratively.
Yeah, one of our employability essentials is adapt to change for all our students. And boy, did we exercise that one this semester.
Yeah. One of the things that we're seeing with our customers is that, you know, not every business model responds to the same pressures as ours. And there are a lot of businesses where reducing the number of contacts, right, like physical contact in between humans, it's really challenging. And what we've noticed is when we're able to work with leaders and teams and we invite their fear to their table, like if we just say, okay, what's not working? What are you afraid of? What is this doing for your business? And then we hear that, we hear it out. And this is part of Agile, right? Part of getting feedback. After we've heard that, we say, okay, what do you want to be? What's your purpose? What do you need to accomplish? And then reframe the idea. Instead of noticing all the barriers to what and who they want to be, we start, how do you be that now in this context, in this reality? And that's where we're starting to see a lot more innovation. So what we're noticing is once we've got the leaders talking and about what their concerns are, what their real fears are, and looking at the reality, the current reality of the context and how people need to be, how do they fulfill their purpose? How do they fulfill their mission? It's different from location to location. So we're seeing a lot of companies create or notice differentiation within themselves that they had never noticed before. So it's been an exciting time, but it's also been quite a challenge for people to work through that fear or through that barrier when they see it as this is all about physical contact. And we've seen amazing ways where people have created systems where it limits the number of people. You know, they have groups of people that see each other all the time and still try to do the best that they can in the context with social distancing to reduce the amount of contact. It's not eliminating all contact. It's not everybody working from home. It's not, you know, eliminating all customers walking through the door anymore, especially since things have been opening up. But people are being really conscientious and our leaders are taking care to reduce the likelihood of the pandemic spreading rapidly. And I'm proud of them for that. I'm proud of them for really looking at what they are and who they are.
Yeah, one of the things we saw was is that, you know, you hear a common theme here: agility and innovation. And one is how we enable agility and innovation. And one of those is we opened up a FAQ, basically ideation session, where we had a committee, and then we had let's open it up to all 8,000 team members and say, give us ideas on how we can do what we can do to help with the COVID. And we got a lot of different from helping building ventilators to build 3D printing of face masks, face gear, and just different ways we work with our customers and being able to virtual. So there is a lot of good ideas, and so my takeaway from that is that you open that up, you talk to just that communication and working through that and getting these ideas and working back through that really helps drive agility in this innovation environment that we're promoting.
Great. So I first want to encourage our participants, our audience on the line. We're going to talk a little bit more, and we'd like to encourage you to submit questions through the Q&A if you've got some questions for our panelists, and we'll work that in as well. We've got maybe about 20 minutes to go, so think about that if you're out there listening. But so we've talked a little bit about where our companies, you know, kind of where we have been, how we're navigating through the crisis. Can you talk about, from a technology perspective specifically, where your organizations are at today and kind of where you see things headed now because of this change into the future? You know, we're kind of at this position right now today, but certainly things have changed and are going to continue to change. What do you see for that?
Yeah, Rob, I can throw in some things. A couple of things that we saw is like obviously social distancing within 6 feet was an opportunity where we said, how do we identify those? So one of those is we're building some prototypes, and we're kind of doing some pilots around how do you alert team members when you're within that 6 feet of each other, to be able to alert both visually and through a vibration. So we're looking at those technologies right now and doing some pilots around that. We also are believing right now that, especially with building with our customers, there's probably some good opportunity in AR, VR, augmented reality, virtual reality experiences that we're looking into. Now, we don't have some specific use cases we're going after, but we are kind of working with our customers to identify those specifically. Like, for instance, if someone wants to inspect a vehicle remotely as opposed to being face-to-face, or if we want to kind of do some test driving. So we're looking at those technologies, and I really believe that that's kind of going to help even when we communicate across each of our segments, and being able to work with each other through feeling like it's a closer relationship and diving into those. So those are some of the things from our perspective. And then obviously we have, maybe we look at some AI and ML stuff to see if we're using our protection gear the way we should be. You know, do we have our face masks, or do we have our safety harnesses? And that potential is out there to be able to explore those. But I look for that to be accelerated over the next few years across, not just for Oshkosh, but just across manufacturing and industries itself.
I think in our case, the collaborative suites is something that has the adoption of that is becoming very common. People, you know, we have had all these collaborative suites for a while, but there's always been a challenge in every organization for, you know, people to be able to effectively utilize them and adopt to make it work. But now recently we have find, so in our case, that has been a very positive, you know, even on a revenue side for us, because we work a lot with those types of systems. So self-service systems and collaborative systems do help. You know, the adoption is becoming very common within large enterprises. But as Don talked about, augmented reality, that is one thing that we are also experiencing, at least in 2 or 3 use cases that we're finding, where one is a very specific, interesting one where it's a company that is makes a platform for apartment rentals and high rises and all of that. And as people are now looking to not be as much in the I would say visiting and all of that, and people want to make a decision. So they were already on this path to be able to create an augmented reality driven showing experience. But now that has become, they're kind of at the front end of that implementation, as opposed to kind of changing it. Their adoption again has improved quite significantly. The other thing that we're also finding is just generally the nature of events, the conferences has now started to transform. And even in that, how people are engaging in collaboration and augmented reality is started to become more real in that respect. So it's a very positive thing, and kind of we're lucky in that manner that all these technologies are at our disposal right now. So had this not been there, I think they're sort of in a slightly different challenge. Now, I'm 100% sure we would have adopted differently anyways, but nonetheless, because they are there, I think the gap from the real life is not as poor as we may actually think to be. And as a matter of fact, people are finding it to be more efficient, as I said earlier, and that's making the behavior change a little bit easier.
One of the things we did at Fox Valley Tech that really enabled us through this whole event was about 10 years ago. We really started developing a virtual infrastructure for all of our IT classes and using VMware, Citrix, things like that. But at this point, we're running about 4,000 virtual machines a semester for about 800 students. So we may have a class that they have 8 or 9 virtual machines, if it's an ethical hacking class or something like that. But even the classes that weren't using it, the infrastructure was there that we could flip right to it and start working with it and get classes running exactly the way we need it, where we've had some of the other technical colleges in the system having to send out removable hard drives or things like that to continue on. And we just flipped the switch and generated the machines and off we went.
From a K-12 school district perspective, as I mentioned earlier, the ability to provide all of our students with a device, Chromebook in this case, has been key for us, but that stopped down to grade 3. So the board just approved last month purchasing an additional 1,600 Chromebooks, which will cover our kids K-12. We also just did some major upgrades to our classrooms this summer, where we not only have the interactive flat panels inside the rooms, but we also have the camera technology so that the instructors can maybe physically be in their classroom, getting at what Mike talked about earlier. When you're a chemistry or biology teacher, there's some limits to what you can do in your basement. So having people be on site and being able to do what we're doing here is going to be key going forward. The other thing I think that we're going to see as we get around this, and this will end. I mean, this is going to end someday. We all hope there's going to be a vaccine by the first of the year, but there will be a vaccine. At some point, we will get past this. What I think you're going to see is the best of both. For us, there's always going to be a connection to some of the in-person stuff because we deal with students as young as 3 years old. So there's just certain things that we are seeing that we are missing out on, and we'll come to value that. And I think it was Mike that said that some students are all of a sudden appreciating the fact that, wow, I do miss being in a room with my teacher. And I think there's going to be a residual positive impact of that effect. So we have all the technology in place to be able to offer it. I'm excited to see where augmented reality goes and where virtual reality goes, because in a mode like this, it can transport you into the classroom where you're not physically able to be in the classroom. So unfortunately, in K-12 education, usually private sector develops that stuff for their business needs first, and then we get it, unless it's coming from the video game and entertainment sector, in which case we can usually tap into that too. So.
One other point that I would like to make also is that I think throughout all of this, one of the biggest impacts is we all had to rethink our networking. right? In our case, especially, we were set up with connections to our customers, VPNs, and how the firewalls and all of that. I think that one area had to be kind of rethought for most of us. I think allowing people to work from home. In certain areas, I'm sure Oshkosh Defense is probably a little bit more secure than others, and there have been some other protocols. We have certain customers that had very strict protocols. To be able to go around that, to be able to ensure that we maintain that security, yet we have the ability to work from different places, that did put us a little bit of a challenge. As I said in an earlier conversation, that was a project for us in itself. And in some cases, we're still tweaking it. We're still kind of enhancing it to make sure it's more efficient. So I think going forward, that will continue to be a challenge as people are redefining, because as I think Dawn pointed out earlier, it is a case-by-case thing in some of these cases. That's not one size fits all.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Tina.
Oh, what I was going to say is we face some similar security problems, or not problems, but challenges. We're always curious and investing and understanding what our risks are with our customers, especially our own personal data, our company data, and our client data. Because we've noticed that this isn't just work from home anymore. As people have had some time to work from home and grow those skills and those connections through technology, it has transitioned in some cases to a work from anywhere type of environment. So I know depending on what I'm doing at home, and we've got a 1-year-old granddaughter now, I could be anywhere and still be able to conduct business. And that's been true for me for quite a while. That hasn't been true for everyone on our team, and it's becoming more and more true. So working from anywhere is more and more of a possibility that I think will stick around in industry and services now into the future.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said up to this point, and I definitely don't want to rehash the things that David and Doug said about education. And I see in the Q&A there's going to be a question for Doug here in a second. But I do want to point out, as we've all talked about, whether it's Javad talking about his company's networking or the delivery that the school districts and other types of higher education are having to make, I think it's really put a spotlight on a macro issue that we at Amplify have been talking about, which is the need to expand the telemedicine and we don't even have a medical representative, and they'd tell you all sorts of wonderful stories about the things that they've been doing in this environment. But even when we've had, I have people trying to do university work on whatever internet connection we had. Now, we had invested as a family in that, but there are lots of places that didn't. So you had a parent having to work from home, a middle schooler having to do some schoolwork, an elementary schooler having to do some schoolwork, and these promises that we have, the infrastructure may not have been there for that. And so I hope it stimulates and kickstarts a larger conversation.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Michael, on that. Is that my personal thoughts, and this is just me talking personally, is not only from an infrastructure standpoint. I believe when this COVID broke out, there was a lack of data across. We couldn't make, no one could get enough data, so they said, give us more data, give us more data, give us more data. So I would see definitely in thermal, IR type of, what's the average temperature in certain areas. I would see smarter cities, smarter infrastructures, and integrations to medical things. And I would see those really trying to potentially take off in the next few years, because if this ever happens again, how we better prepared.
Great. Thanks, Don. We've got a question from our audience, and it's kind of geared to Doug, but I think David, you'll be able to chime in as well. Basically, it's understanding the synergies between tech and in-classroom offerings for school systems. Has there been discussions for reducing the footprint of physical school locations? You know, given the length of time FETC has been offering off-site learning, have they noticed reduced requirements for physical expansion? And I'm sure, David, you might have some thoughts on that as well, and Michael, maybe yourself too. Doug, take that first.
Yeah, when we look at it, because we're actually looking at this at the very beginning of how is this going to affect our room utilization and all that, just because of the reduced class sizes that we're seeing of only be able to handle like 9 students at a time, our labs are actually being utilized even more than we had in the past, and we're having scheduling difficulties to make sure that we can get everybody in. I think if you're looking at just the standard, you know, a bunch of seats in a room and computers, we've moved a lot of that online. So there's a transition depending on which side you are. The more hands-on things, we're going to probably face challenges on getting that. In fact, we're expanding our manufacturing area this summer just because we've had more people trying to access that kind of technology, and it is hands-on. So we still have to figure out a way to get them in there and get their hands-on portion.
From a K-12 perspective, I think we're talking a short-term, long-term thing. Short-term, we may need to be running our classrooms at half capacity. In that mode, we don't have enough space, right? So we're going to be doing sort of an A-B day type situation if we indeed are going to be in a hybridized situation where we have half the kids come on day 1, other half come on day 2. So we're thinking about that, right? In that kind of a mode, our 20 buildings is not enough space, but we can figure that out. But long term, the Oshkosh Area School District is working on a consolidation plan going from 20 sites down to 14. And the point of that is we have a whole bunch of smaller physical spaces right now. The vision is to go to larger spaces that are far more flexible, that look a lot more like Fox Valley Technical College, you know, in terms of flexibility, bigger open spaces, et cetera. So I see this changing. I see a permanent change to where some things are going to be offered online because people are going to choose that. So does that decrease the need for space? It may. And it actually plays into the school district's current initiative to try and basically right size us down to about 14 physical sites that are better equipped and more flexible to handle whatever comes at us.
Great, thanks. And Michael, did you have any comments from university's perspective on space?
You know, it's something that we struggle all the time, landlocked within, and we have had some opportunities to expand our footprint when we've needed to. I think one of the things that very few are talking about is whether or not in-person instruction will come back in the fall at the 4-year institute of something like coronavirus is living in tight spaces, right? That's why it is the first hotspots are in places like New York City and large metropolitan areas where people are packed in closely together. It's one thing when you're living in a house with 4, it's another when you're going away from home and living with someone you don't know, and you're having to share a bathroom with people, and how do you deal with the safety of that housing? And so while you know, the question of if we go online, how will that impact the footprint of a university? That's one question. But if the question is, you know, how are we doing with recovering in this environment, housing, the A/B schedule type things that David was talking about, the increased need for labs that Doug was talking about, these are all factors that may point it in the other direction. So I think we always need to be open to questions of what's new and looking at new ideas, but we also have to say, for what reason, what's the alternative if we reduce our footprint? What is that land being used for or reallocated to? So it's
and cut.
All right. Yeah, Michael, I think you were cutting out a little bit there at the end. No problem. We've got another question. Actually, a couple questions, but we'll start. We're getting close to 11 o'clock. I know we're at 11. We'll keep going just a few more minutes. The next question is, what IT careers and classes will become more prominent and or needed with the new norm we now live in?
Well, I think I can offer some insight, just my opinion, I guess. I think we're going to see some of the hot areas just get hotter. Security being one of those. I think security from the IT side, having all of these remote workers, all these remote locations now popping up. To your point, Tina, you said you could work really from anywhere. It's still important to keep an eye on that security side. So I think those positions are going to be very, very important. I think the rest of the panels also talked about using AI and all of the things that can come along with that, that data scientist role, understanding data, looking at data. Companies are going to be looking at very shortly, what was this shift? What was this impact? Are employees more productive? Are they less productive in this remote atmosphere and whatnot? So I think those are going to be pretty solid areas for growth. I think, again, the other piece is just understanding the communication platforms that are out there, being able to be agile on Zoom, on Microsoft Teams, or any of the other areas. So I think there's going to be administrative roles that'll be from that end. So again, just kind of my thoughts on it.
Great. Okay. Final question. Do you project an influx of mental health issues, especially in K-12 in the school system? And are there plans to address that given this crisis? And I suppose that could extend to any panelists of dealing with kind of that, all those issues that have come up.
I don't think that's specific to us. Do we think there's going to be an influx of issues in addition to what we already have been dealing with? Probably, perhaps, probably more so with the adults. We're finding in some cases that this has helped calm some of those K-12 issues because the students aren't all packed together at a moment, and it just eliminates some of that conflict. I do think that we're going to continue to see K-12 mental health as a focus. We have teams that our teachers are doing a phenomenal job of individually reaching out to students who may be having some of those issues. We have a lot of supports in place already. We're getting better at that. But once again, even that is being reinvented in this type of world where we can't physically be together. That's a challenge going forward. I do think staff are having, I think adults, I think all of us are having a little bit of cabin fever here. You're not going on vacations necessarily. You're in this same room. I think there's a lot of people who are missing getting back together again. I saw a video of a Packer game, and I was at a Packer game last season, and everybody is obviously packed in the bowl, and that just seems like, oh my God, can you remember when we used to do that? So I think there's a lot of issues with that.
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead, Tina.
What we're seeing from an executive coaching and leadership coaching perspective is a lot of people are experiencing a lot of emotions, and they're sitting with them a little bit longer and in more private spaces or in smaller groups than they've ever been accustomed to. So it's put some pressure on mental health. We've noticed that. What we see is it is a little more challenging for people who have a tendency to be anxious or experience anxiety, are concerned about the future in times of uncertainty. It puts pressure on what Dave, you referred to as those black and white leaders, right? It's either this or that. And we've noticed that it's put pressure on families and in some cases, people who have a lot of extrovert tendencies really get their energy from being in and among groups of people. They've got some needs to address too in different ways, creating different ways to really resource themselves, get back to their better self. So yeah, we are seeing that a pandemic and social distancing or, physical distancing is creating some opportunity for mental health pressure, things getting worse for some people.
I'm going to make light of it a little bit, but I keep getting text messages from my car wanting to know why I'm not using it, why I'm not driving.
Yeah.
Is our relationship in trouble?
Yeah, I think it might be.
Keep my car comforted that we'll get some miles going here pretty soon. So,
Javad, did you want to add anything?
I was just going to say earlier is that I'm not an expert on mental health, but certainly what I find is that the uncertainty is causing a lot of anxiety. And that's why I think we talked about communication and everything. The more we talk, I think that will help subside some of those concerns. The other aspect of it is behavior change. Those are the two things that people are struggling with. I have to change the way I work. I have to change the way I do anything. Some people are good with it. Some people are not. Those who struggle with it are struggling with it. But I think even for those, if we know, we're coming back next month, we're coming back next year, once that roadmap is established, I think people will settle down. Not having that roadmap is what causes anxiety. Not knowing, and then in many cases, so this is just us and our teams, but unfortunately, there's many who have, lost their jobs or have other concerns of livelihood that has actually putting different types of pressure, right? So regardless of the fact that they're, are ready to change or not, it's just that, the lines of businesses that are in are just not performing. So that's where I think majority of the concerns are probably in those sectors as opposed to some of the sectors that we're representing.
Great. Thanks, Javad. Well, we're already about 8 minutes over, so I'll put it out. I'm not seeing any more questions. Is there any last comments anybody'd like to make? Otherwise, we'll wrap it up.
Matt, go put on some miles.
yeah. I'm going to have to go talk to my car here.
Build that relationship with your car, man. Great. Well, all right, I want to wrap it up, and I want to thank all of our panelists for participating this morning. I want to thank you for your leadership within Amplify and the Oshkosh Chamber, the Oshkosh community, and I think this was a great success today. And we'll continue to plan these events. So for our attendees, please watch the Chamber website, watch the Amplify Oshkosh website for future events, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great day.
Bye now.